Okay, Sunday lunch with the grandparents. Jamie's grandfather has had a bad war, to say the least, and it's now 40 years later. The ritual began at midday. Jamie and his family sat in a row on the sofa, eating small, cheesy biscuits. When the roast was on the table, all took their seats except Jamie's grandfather. He remained in his study for the moment, his cardiganed upper body indistinctly visible through the frosted glass window at the end of the hallway. Only when the meat and vegetables were on the plates did he emerge and advance. He proceeded at an angle, with his normal side leading. Then he walked the long way around the table, rotating slowly as he did so, and sat with his head cocked to one side, as though something intriguing were going on in the living room. "Good," Jamie's grandmother would announce then. "Let's begin." While Jamie sawed at the leathery beef and tried to avoid looking at his grandfather's horrific side, his grandmother conducted conversations with Jamie's parents, supplying also her husband's part, because Jamie's grandfather did not speak. Sometimes he breathed out in a peculiar way. It sounded like, "Oi," but he had not spoken an actual word, Jamie gathered, since the war. He spent his days in front of a drafting board set up in the study, engaged in what Jamie's grandmother referred to as grandfather's work. Intricate diagrams on large sheets of paper which Jamie would glimpse as the door opened, but he was not permitted to officially see. When the plates were cleared away, Jamie's grandmother sent Jamie outside to keep the old man company while he smoked his weekly hand-rolled cigarette. The back garden overlooked the country rolling away towards the spines, whose highest ridge was visible on clear days. Jamie sat always on his grandfather's right, the unhorrific side, while the old man puffed. It was on one of these occasions, a cloudless day, that the old man opened his mouth. To rid it of a strand of tobacco, Jamie assumed, as his grandfather blew through his lips, or to utter his usual softly breathed "oi," or to wheeze out the strong blue smoke. But Jamie was wrong. "Worst thing," said his grandfather. The old man scratched his scarred nose. Then he opened his mouth again. "Worst thing to sleep on, son. Coal." Jamie stared. His grandfather puffed on his cigarette as though nothing had happened. Perhaps nothing had, Jamie wondered as he followed the old man back indoors. But other utterances followed on other Sundays, sometimes a word, never more than a sentence. After each, his grandfather would relapse into silence. The ritual continues for some time. Jamie gets a little less unsuccessful at being himself, which is a benefit when you're 16. I can vouch from personal experience. And starts to encounter girls, which his grandmother picks up on. She's in the kitchen. "Do you meet girls, James?" Jamie's grandmother's kitchen questions grew more pointed and more blunt as the summer wore on. Pots banged on the stove. She was making sucky pudding. "Yes," Jamie answered. "Lots." They sat down. Jamie's grandfather made his rotating entrance. They ate. His grandmother brought out a heavy brown bowl and set it on the table. "Just think, all this time living here in Sufton, and I've never made sucky pudding." "I never have either," Jamie's mother reassured her. "All those different milks." "I left out the buffalo," confessed his grandmother. Jamie pushed an off-white clod around his bowl. His grandfather didn't pick up his spoon. The table was quiet. Outside, on the bench, Jamie watched the old man roll his cigarette, but then he set it aside. "Are you all right, Grandad?" Jamie asked. He didn't expect an answer. In April, the old man had had to gather his strength. "This isn't China, son," he had managed eventually. Today, Jamie decided, was a non-speaking day. The old man gazed across the back fields The tops of the spines were visible in the far distance. "Americans," said Jamie's grandfather, and stopped. Jamie counted slowly to 7. "Son, they aren't as stupid as they look." Moving on. Okay, this is the last bit I'll read. Jessica. Oh, God, I remember Jessica. She had 100 different names, but I couldn't talk to her. It's being 16. In this book I was interested in writing about one's adolescent self. In a way, it's a sort of challenge. As you get older, of course, you discard, the selves that you were before. And one of the quickest ones to be discarded is you, age 16. It's not a memory that any of us can usually revisit with any joy, with the possible exception of Françoise Sagan. So I wanted to write about what they do, what they get up to, and I also wanted to keep writing about the grandfather who plays a part in this novel, and a posthumous one as well. Jessica was the girl that you eyed across the pub. Depending on your sex, Jessica was the girl who you eyed across the pub, but you never got up the courage to actually speak to. Or if you were of the other sex, she was that bitch. I suppose this passage was in a way was a sort of subtle revenge on her in a way, but a genial one. Later, of course, I met Jessica, many times, and she was fine actually. It was great talking to her, but I never got her into bed. Okay, this is the life of 16-year-olds in Sufton in this book. Okay. Jessica had gone out with Nick after Seth, then Brett for a while, then Flea, and one of the Sighs. The Jessica refugees had their own table at the back of the Dog at Night as a pub, where they talked about how they felt about Jessica. "It's like people who say they like winter," Ernie beyond his years told the gloomy group one night. "Roaring fires, snowballs, icicles, being snuggled up inside, all that. But that's not liking winter. That's liking being insulated from winter." The Jessica refugees stared up. "See?" Ernie added. He walked back to a curious Jamie and Toxo. Toxo is Jamie's friend, I'm sorry. "So what did they say?" "What would anyone say?" said Ernie. If you don't know you're unhappy, who's to say you should say you are? You might not be, Toxo and Jamie nodded. Ernie gave very good advice. He was known for it. It was just very hard to figure out what it meant. Jamie nodded again. He wasn't unhappy, or if he was, he didn't know it any more than Seth and the Jessica refugees did. He was sort of going out with Penny by then. Toxo was just seeing Wendy, then Bindi, who Jamie actually preferred to Penny, until he got off with her after Toxo dumped her to go out with Wendy, 1-to-1 as it were, although Jamie knew he was seeing Penny on the side. "It's kind of tricky," Toxo said. "They both want to come to Morgan's party. Who are you going with?" "No one," said Jamie. I'm not invited." "No one's invited," Toxo said. "You just go." "He's this guy at the university," Bright Brown added. "Old?" Toxo nodded. 20. Does scientific stuff. Has his party. "But is it all right? I've never even met him." "No one has. He doesn't go." Jamie drifted around the Dog, talking and drinking. Bri Brown told him that Penny had told him that Jessica told her that Penny shouldn't have split up with him, even though Penny had said it was the other way round, because Jessica said Jamie wasn't like that, said Bri. Jamie nodded and said, "Yeah." He got another drink. He put his name on the board to play pool, then missed his turn. He drifted between the groups of his friends and found himself back by the window at the front. A sign read, "Birthplace of Sucky Pudding," on the old dairy opposite. On the parapet stood a series of weather-beaten bovine blobs. Toxo arrived beside him, swaying slightly and smiling. "You know," Toxo said, "what I like about all this?" He gestured